Mr. President, fellow officers, delegates to the second annual convention of the Mississippi State Industrial Union Council. And Brother Walker, I certainly want to thank you for your kind and generous introduction. This morning, in hearing an address given by a great president of a great union, Jacob Petoskey of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers. And it occurred to me that what he said was full of meaning when he began talking about the early history, the early crusade of people in this country to mold themselves into an organization where they could bargain collectively in the interest of their welfare. It took me back to the days that were associated with the advent of the New Deal.
Testing 9765432. Testing 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Testing.
President of the United States sending him to
Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing.
employees. The commission's report to the president in the automobile industry. They were no longer able to cut the bus. They were people ready to be thrown on the industrial scrap heap. And with the advent of NRA, which gave incentives to people to join labor unions, then the manufacturers' associations of the separate cities began their fight against this terrible crusade of people who wanted to join unions. People, because they did not curry the favor of the boss, were people who were laid off, people who were fired. The very thought of anybody wanting to join a union meant not only a blacklist in the shop they were currently working in, but it also meant that they were blacklisted in the entire industry. I remind you of those things. I know that you know about them. But I think it's well and good at times that we take inventory of ourselves. As Brother Petoskey put it last night, these things didn't come to any of us on a silver platter. These things came to us as a result of bitterness, struggle, and yes, death. There are many a sincere worker today lying under the sod because of the sacrifices he made in order that we might have a union today. Just recent history of the labor movement, and I'm only going back some 20 years, during the period of the sit-down strike in Michigan, when people who helped the auto workers to help themselves build an organization were dragged from hotels in the cities of Saginaw and Bay City, Michigan, by goons, thugs hired by the General Motors Corporation, taken in automobiles out into fields, slugged, bled, and left to die. There's some of them around today still carrying the banner for CIO who can still tell the story. This brings us to mind just what happened a few short weeks ago in President Eisenhower's message to the Congress, the State of the Union message. You know, to those of us who read and listened to the speeches of candidate Eisenhower when he was running for the presidency of the United States, remembered his remarks with respect to the labor relations policy of the government in this country. In speaking before the American Federation of Labor's convention in New York City, candidate Eisenhower said we must have strong unions because weak unions are irresponsible. We agree with the statement made by candidate Eisenhower. But let's look at some subsequent history. In his State of the Union message, when he talked about policy in dealing with labor unions in this country, concurrent with his speech to the Congress, Senator Smith of the state of New Jersey had already authored a bill to present to the United States Senate, which broke down, tore apart all the statements that candidate Eisenhower made during his campaign. For example, under the proposed labor legislation, Senator Smith proposes that in order to establish a union shop in contract, that the bargaining or the union having bargaining rights must first gain a majority of the number of people in the bargaining unit. Not the number of people voting, but the number of people in the bargaining unit. You know, this was one of the first provisions of the Taft-Hartley Act. It was later amended and had that particular provision stricken out. We often wonder if people like Senator Smith and his associates would apply the same test in their congressional and senatorial areas that they had to receive a majority of all the eligible voters instead of a majority of those people who had voted. Senator Smith's proposal, and of course there is a disagreement between the President of the United States today and the proposed legislation. Senator Smith's bill presupposes that workers have a right under law. Workers shall be mandated under law to vote as to whether or not they want to continue a strike. Administration sources claim that the President meant that the government should conduct elections prior to a strike vote. The President was so confused because he was so ill-advised by the big business gang that surrounds the White House that he finally said, we'll let the whole matter rest in the hands of the Congress. Now let's see what these two bills, or this one bill, does. Let's see what the two meanings of the bill mean to labor unions throughout this country. Number one, under the Eisenhower advisor proposal, it would mean this: a cleavage or a division between the rank and file membership and the leadership of union organizations. It would mean that the membership is not responsive to the direction given to them by their leadership. Under the Smith proposal, it would mean simply nothing more than a strike-breaking tactic. You know, during the last war, under the so-called and infamous Smith-Conley Act, which required elections prior to a strike, elections conducted by the government, during that period, 2,933,000 eligible workers voted in these elections. Out of that number, 333,000 voted against going on strike. 1,500,000 voted in favor of going on strike, and this was during a critical war period. But the number of strikes that were prosecuted in those days was a negligible number as against the total number of votes taken. As a matter of fact, the number was insignificant. Why? Because the leadership of the labor unions in this country gave its pledge to its government, to its president, that there would be no strikes during this critical emergency, the war emergency. It was a demonstration of patriotism, a demonstration of leadership, and what is the reward that is offered to labor today is a thing that Senator Smith and the President's message contemplate. The President said many things during this campaign with respect to making unions stronger and, as a result, making them more responsible. The President spoke about legislation in the individual states of our union. You know, today we have about 16 of the 48 states which have the state right or the right to work law. Incidentally, I have been informed that a measure of this type is before your state legislature in Mississippi. Now, what is the right to work? I have gone into some areas like Arkansas, Iowa, some other states, Arizona, and I found this, that the right to work only means the right of an employer to work people long hours at short wages. They certainly have not indicated that the right to work law, as they put it, has given the green light to the employer to establish a liberal labor relations policy. To the contrary, it means deprivation and destitution for those people employed by employers in those particular states. The very fact that the President in his State of the Union message made no reference to state right laws, and the very fact that Senator Smith's bill does make reference to the extent that it suggests to the several states that they pass compulsory arbitration laws in cases of controversies between employee and employer. It also proposes to break down the security of unions that are built around finances to operate, that the present checkoff provisions now be revocable by any member of any union at any time. This is a diabolic attempt upon the part of big business through their emissaries in the Congress to smash unions. You know, CIO has given a lot of thought to what best to be done to tear apart this threat that we are confronted with. broad, comprehensive view as to how it can act best in the interest of the people who are members of our great crusade. You see, CIO people are not only wage earners. CIO is made up of wives, husbands, fathers, mothers, taxpayers, residents, war veterans, people who buy war bonds, people who manufacture consumers' goods, and people who consume manufactured goods. People who are a part of civic, fraternal, social organizations, and members of race and nationality groups. That's what CIO is. And as a result of this multiplicity of interests, concerns, and needs, CIO looks to councils such as yours to speak for CIO in given communities. And CIO is, such as your council, is a splendid instrument for our people to give vent to their feeling and to their aspirations. Through our councils, our people can make a decision on programs that will best meet the needs not only of CIO people, but people throughout the country. They can make known their desires, their contentions to elect people to office who can carry out that type of program. The councils are an instrument where we can establish our trade unions in the social, economic, and political fabric of any community in the United States. It secures for CIO the attention of the people of this country in carrying through a program that will meet the needs of those people. You know, when we start thinking, as Brother Petoskey put it last night, that we cannot go back to the days of 1929, 31, and 32, it reminds me of a story, and I want you to listen intently to this story because it is a true story, and it's a story that has a terrific moral. In 1938, the automobile industry in the state of Michigan was only employing, for a period of about 6 months, about 8% of the total employment in the industry. We had what was then known as a recession in the automobile industry. As a result of mass layoffs, the United Automobile Workers of America decided that they would set up a welfare organization to take care of its people who were out of work and were facing privation. It so happened that the president of our international union named your speaker as the director of this project. My job was to see to it that people secured welfare help based upon need and that they received certification to WPA jobs. A short while after I had assumed this role of director, a lady came into my office. She identified herself. She said, "My name is Mrs. Charles McCarrion. My husband works in the Rouge plant, the Ford Rouge plant. He works in the motor building, or he did work there." And she says, "I'm in trouble." says, my husband is in jail. And I have 2 children at home. They're going to school. I can't get any help, and I don't know what I'm going to do. This woman was ill-clad, and she appeared to be in ill health. Well, in 1938, you remember back, our union, the automobile workers and the CIO, didn't have the prestige, did not have the influence in Michigan that we have today. We were fighting then for recognition. We didn't have the Ford plant organized. Although we had a union established there, we had a charter. We had approximately 200 members out of the some 70,000 that worked there at the time. Mrs. McCarion's husband was a member of the local. He was one of the 200 that joined the union. And here's the story that she told me. She said, one day while my husband was working in the motor building, a foreman came around. The foreman's name was Tom Tour. This is all a matter of record. Tom Tour said, Charlie, you know there's going to be a layoff next week, but if you buy a car from a friend of mine, I'll see that you're not laid off. As a matter of fact, I'll see that you get a better job. Now, Charlie didn't want the car, he didn't need the car, but he did need his job. We had no union there, 200 people out of 70,000. So Charlie decided that he would buy the car to hold his job, in order the foreman could get a little commission from this friend who was selling the car. So Charlie got enough together to put a down payment on this Ford. This happened in 1938. Keep that year in mind. Charlie bought the car, and a short while after he had it in his possession, something mechanically went wrong with it. And he and his eldest son was pushing it over an incline. And they lost control of it, and it hit the front end of a 1928 Ford. Now, this was in 1938. It hit the front end of a 1928 Ford. Charlie was hailed into traffic court. He was fined $10 or 3 days in jail and placed on probation for a period of 6 months, during which period of time he was to make restitution in the amount of $196 for banging into a 1928 Ford in 1938. Now, Charlie, being rather frugal by nature, decided that he would spend the 3 days in jail in lieu of paying the $10 fine, inasmuch as it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he did. Charlie is released from jail after serving the 3 days, reported to his job at the Rouge plant on Monday morning, worked 3 days, and on the 4th day, the foreman came around with the well-known pink slip. Foreman did not keep his word. Charlie was laid off. That's where Charlie's difficulties began. Charlie, after considerable time, was able to get on to the welfare department. He received a couple of checks, nominal small checks from the department, and he was told that he would have to leave the rolls of the welfare department because he was eligible for WPA. Charlie received 1 check from the WPA when he was told he had to get off that job because he was eligible for Michigan unemployment insurance. Charlie left his WPA job. 2 weeks later, he received a check from the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Commission, and that was the last one he received because the officers of the law came to Charlie's house, and once again, he was thrown into jail for 30 days because Charlie had not paid any part of the $196 restitution, something that he couldn't do. Now, we set up committees to go down to see the judge. Yes, we can name names. Judge George T. Murphy in City, Detroit, asking that Charlie McCarion be permitted to spend his sentence on the weekend so that he could provide for his family during the week. The judge didn't listen to our plea. We went to the welfare department to get additional help. We were met with deaf ears. On this last visit of Mrs. McCarrion, I said, Mrs. McCarrion, here's an address. Tomorrow morning, I want you to go here to 51 West Warren Avenue, the Council of Social Agencies. They're going to take care of you and your family till your husband gets out of jail. Mrs. McCarrion nodded her head as she left my office. But Mrs. McCarrion did not keep that appointment at 9 o'clock in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, her eldest son came home from school and found his dear old mother hanging from a rafter dead. You see, my friends, except for the grace of God, that could have been your wife, my wife, your mother, my mother. And if we had done the job of organizing the Ford Motor Company in 1938, as we did General Motors, Chrysler, Briggs, Packard, Hudson's, and on down the line, no doubt Mrs. McCarrion would have been alive today. Because where we have organization, we do not have foremen coming around and say, if you'll buy a car from a friend of mine, you can retain your job. Because where we have union organizations, we have union contracts. Where we have union contracts, we have seniority provisions. And if we had organized, secondly, on the political front, we would not have had judges like Judge George T. Murphy in the city of Detroit, whose lack of judicial concept in handling this case contributed to the death of this wife and mother. Now, many of us might forget and say, well, it can't happen again. Well, it can happen again. I pray with you that it doesn't happen again. And it probably won't happen again. Because this great instrument, this great organization that we are all a part of, naturally is going to play a vigilant and an alert role to see that those things do not happen again. Because it must be remembered, my friends, that those people who, for selfish reasons, want to smash labor organizations work 24 hours a day. They are not sleeping. They're not sleeping. And that means to us that we cannot fall asleep either. That we must remain always vigilant. That we must remain always on the alert. We must knock down any suspicions, any whisperings that we say, that we hear rather, about those people who attack our union. We've got to be suspicious and jealous of our union. That's the way we're going to survive. I know that you have other speakers here during the course of your convention, and I understand it's to conclude today. And I don't propose to take up any more of your time, except to say this, that as I left Washington, President Reuther asked me to convey to you his deep regret due to his inability to accept your kind invitation to address you. But he did say this, however, that he was hopeful that this council again would extend him an invitation to speak before it, and that if conditions warranted it, circumstances permitted it, he would be ever glad to speak to such a fine type organization. He asked me to tell you that he wanted to compliment you on the fine job that you have done, that you have received a great degree of recognition throughout the councils of CIO for the type of effort that you've made in the interest of your membership. I know that the leadership here is fortunate. The leadership of your council, the membership of your council, the local unions are fortunate in having the type of leadership that represents CIO in our regional office. Bob Starn. Sure that most people here, practically everybody here knows Bob. They have worked with him in the past, and you can rest assured that you're going to get that kind of leadership that reflects the kind of a job that CIO wants done for those people who are members of this great organization, members of this great crusade. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. It's always a pleasure to have you, and always a pleasure to hear you speak and tell the stories of the crusade at CIO. We are very happy to have you down here with us, and we look forward to you coming back again someday.
For me to present to you the Vice President of the United Rebel Workers, Joseph W. Shaw. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, officers, delegates to the Second Annual Convention of the Mississippi State Industrial Union Council, visitors and friends. I was very happy to accept the invitation to attend this council meeting and have an opportunity to discuss some of the problems confronting organized labor. Let me say at first that I'm certainly proud that we have membership in this council. We have two local unions of our organization in the state of Mississippi, one here in Jackson, which is a local union of the Armstrong Court and Linoleum Company. Also, a local union in the Armstrong Rubber Company of Natchez, Mississippi. I've had the pleasure, the opportunity, and the pleasure of attending meetings of both of the local unions in years past and assisted in some small way in their negotiations. I'm quite familiar with the gains that have been made by these two local unions, and I feel that with the type of leadership and the type of representation which these local unions can give to the council here in Mississippi, that they are making a substantial and profitable contribution to the success of the CIO and to the labor movement in the state of Mississippi. A few years ago, in fact, it was at the start of 1946, there was quite a differential between the wages of the workers in the plants in the South and the plants of the North. We have been able to whittle in half the differential that has existed between the workers and the companies of the southern plants and the plants of the northern company. The plant that I referred to in Natchez, Mississippi, the Armstrong Rubber Company, has the highest wage of any of the plants in the southern states. They have the highest wage of any plant of the Armstrong Rubber Company, which has plants in West Haven, Connecticut, Des Moines, Iowa, and Norwalk, Connecticut, and of course the Natchez, Mississippi plant. Not only is it the highest paid plant of this company, but also it is one of the highest paid plants in the tire and tube industry of any plants in the country. We feel that we have a good militant organization, and again that they have made a substantial contribution to the labor movement here as well as all over the country. The other evening I had an opportunity in Philadelphia to talk about an entirely different subject I'm speak on today. And during that discussion, I referred to the fact that here in the southern states, as well as some of the other states throughout the country, that the state legislatures had been enacting labor laws, anti-labor laws. They call them the Right to Work bills, and that they had taken away from us the gains which we had been able to secure after a long struggle and after having put a great deal of strength of our organization into bargaining the things out across the bargaining table. And I don't think that it's going to hurt anything for me to refer today again to the fact that the things that we are able to get across the bargaining table can very easily be taken away from us at the ballot box. I have heard some people say that they get sick and tired of hearing people talk about PAC and getting out the vote and that sort of thing, that we should confine ourselves to the things which we are organized to work on, and that is, of course, bargaining and increase in wages and the like of that, better conditions. Well, I say it's foolish, utterly foolish, for us to dissipate the time of the organization in bargaining these things if we intend at some later date to permit them to be taken away from us through the ballot box. In our union, we're proud of the record that we have made in negotiating the union shop. Some people will say that that's not bread and butter. Well, it certainly is bread and butter. If you have union shop conditions, if you have your union secured with union shop, then certainly you don't have to dissipate the time of the organization on the organizational work. Well, we have been successful in negotiating union shop provisions into 94% of our contracts. It's exceeded only by the amalgamated clothing workers. We're proud of that record. The only state here in the South that doesn't have the Right to Work bill where we have organization is the state of Mississippi. And in every other state where we have an organization and we have negotiated the union shop, we have had it taken away from us through the ballot box. Now, if that has happened to the other states, it can happen to Mississippi. And the only way that you can stop it is to become active in the political action in your organization. The interest of CIO are not narrow and selfish. Our interests are very broad. And it is our purpose to work with any group who has the same aim and objectives that our organization has for the betterment of the entire community. Yes, of the entire world. And that leads me into what I want to discuss with you today. I am sure that you have an interest in the labor organization as it regards its worldwide operations. I'm sure that it's easy to understand the role that is played by your union and the labor movement in your community, in your state, and in your nation. And I think that it is of equally importance that we consider the role that we're called upon to play in world affairs. The problems of the worker, regardless of where he is the same. And the aims and objectives of the labor throughout this world, I am sure, is the same. The WCFTU has set forth the aims and purposes of that organization of organized labor throughout the world as being bread, freedom, and peace. They're very simple, but they're very important. After World War I in Greece, where the communists had been successfully spreading the line that the ECA was rebuilding the country for the rich capitalists, a bonus plan was set up for the Greek workers to restore the war-shattered railroad tracks. For every mile of track that was laid, one worker was killed by the communist guerrillas. When the workers went to collect their bonus, the Greek railroad officials said, "Sorry, no bonus. The plans have been changed." The Greek worker, it looked like the communists were right after all. And their trust in the Marshall Plan was, to say the least, shattered. But then and there, an American labor representative interceded and argued for the Greek workers. He argued, these workers were told that they would get a bonus for speeding up the work. And since they have done that work, they must be paid. The American labor representative took the case to the top directors of the Marshall Plan. The Greek worker got their bonus. And with it a lesson in the part that labor was playing in the administration of the Marshall Plan and in protecting the interest of the worker of the European nation. You might well ask, why was it that a representative of the American trade union movement was on the job when this situation occurred? The fact is that we have representatives in foreign countries because we know that unionism cannot stop at a national boundary. We know that the drop in wages in Paris can mean unemployment in Pittsburgh, Jackson, New Orleans, or anywhere else in this country. Anti-labor activities in South America can cause a general reaction throughout the whole Western world that will involve all the American people. And of course, communist infiltration or aggression which always has trade unions as its first objective, can at any moment cause a worldwide crisis. organization, as democratic Americans, there is much that we can do to help our fellow workers in other nations. We enjoy a higher standard of living on the average than any other country in the world. Our union, while new, are strong and has a place in our society. But in many areas, repression and poverty and suffering are the normal way of life. As trade union members, as men and women dedicated to the improvement of humanity, we want to help the less fortunate to enjoy more of the blessings of life. And with our skills and experience, we can help other people find the benefits of democracy and to cast aside the propaganda of the communists and the fascists. We know that communism and dictatorship flourishes in the swamps of economic misery. It is a significant fact that the overwhelming greater part, numerically, of the people who are today under communist rule have always been under dictatorial rule and have never known democracy. Walter Reuther has said that the shortest march of communism is through the empty bellies of hungry, desperate people. Because we are devoted to American democracy, we do not want to see a further spread of these wicked ideologies. At the same time, we ought to know very clearly that all the atom bombs in the world will not stop the gnawing of hunger in the stomachs of hundreds of millions of Asians. And you can't eliminate malaria with machine guns or prevent the propaganda moving into this ready breeding ground on the size of the armament. It is just like a police force in a good community. Without a police force, the burglars will run wild and you will have nothing left. But just getting a good police force does not give you a good school movement, a good labor movement, or a good democratic community. It can only give you the chance to have these things. So we have to stand firm, and we must be firm. It can only be a means to an end. It is only part of the struggle. And you cannot buy the credit or goodwill of Asia with all the gold in Fort Knox. When we come to them and say, we will give you all this money if you stand beside us and do what we say and jump through the hoops we hold out for you, they shake their heads and say no. And they have a right to say no. Again, the labor movement should understand this. It would be like the manufacturer coming to us and saying, we will buy you a new union hall. We will help to build you a new swimming pool and playground. And we'll do this and do that. And all you have to do is go down the alley we work out of and vote and do as we suggest. In any community in America, if somebody would come to you and say that he would build you a playground and a school and a swimming pool, and all you have to do is support him for sheriff and vote the way you think, and at the next election, they would drive that man out of town. That is the way the Asians resent and the way they react when we go to them and say that we have the money and we'll bail you out if you do as we say. They resent it, just as you and I would resent it. And they have that right. There's something like 1 billion people in Asia, and they may well hold the destinies of free worlds in their hands, because if the communists should win this area, and if the Iron Curtain could clamp down upon the 1 billion people, then the whole balance of her power would shift dangerously towards communism. And we would be faced with stark disaster. On the other hand, that this billion people continue to grow in a democracy and continues to exert its freedom and continues to ask for higher living standards for its people, eventually all of Asia will be stabilized and hereafter help greatly in stabilizing the entire world. Recognizing the seriousness of the international situation and the vital role that unionism can play and must play, the role that American labor must play. The question is, how do we work it out in the foreign policy field? How are we going to achieve these goals? Well, labor tries to get representatives on the various governmental agencies, such as Point 4, Foreign Operations Administration, which was the successor to the Marshall Plan, the Labor Department and the State Department. In the past, we've been successful in working out with the State Department these problems by getting labor representatives appointed to serve as labor attachés to the various foreign governments. However, since the Eisenhower administration has taken over in Washington, many of these highly skilled persons have been fired, and the labor movements that remain generally have been ignored on matters in which they are experts. In some instances, they have been forced to resign. As an example, George Means, President of the American Federation of Labor, just recently resigned from the Foreign Operations Administration. At the time that he resigned, he made a very significant statement. I think it's worth repeating. He said that the entire labor program of the agency has been dismantled. I say to you, it's extremely serious. And this administration and future administrations certainly should be well aware of the steps that they're taking. Because I think it goes without saying that the labor movement has done more effective work in combating communism here at home and communism throughout the world with the steps that it has taken than any other single force, either here in America or anywhere in the world. And I say it certainly is important that this administration changes its tactics and give recognition to the role that the American labor movement has been playing in combating communism. The international labor organizations bring together representatives of the workers, the employers, and government. The ILO was founded in 1919, established as an associated agency of the League of Nations back in 1919. And because of its specialized operations, it became a part of the United Nations, and I believe it was 1946. The ILO seeks to raise labor and social standards throughout the world to a level which will put an end to misery and want. It helps the underdeveloped and the backward countries to increase production. Of course, coupled with that must be higher wages and lower prices in order to improve upon the standard of living in these countries. This is done primarily through technical assistance programs. Many of you may know, certainly we and the rubber workers know, that our industry is primarily an incentive industry. And because of the nature of the wage payment plans, it was essential that our organization of course, learn the technique of incentives. Whenever we've had exchange students from other countries visit our country, we generally get our share of them. And we have had them to come into our plants, into our unions, and learn of the techniques which we have used in order to improve upon the wages and also to eliminate the speed up of the incentive system. And I feel that in most instances they have gone away somewhat impressed by the technique that we have used to get at least a corresponding increase in wage with the increase in production that has taken place. We have seen the advance of technological improvements in our industry, and as your chairman has said, I first went into the rubber industry in 1928, and at that time we were just moving out of the hand-building operations, the hand-building of tires. And today, the same tires that I was building in 1928 are being built at a much faster pace. Yes, sometimes 25 and 35 times as many tires are being built today as was being built in 1928. Most of that has come about because of technological improvements. We don't feel that the workers in our industry are working any faster today than what they were in 1928. In many instances, we know for a fact that they are not working as hard or as fast as they were 25, 26 years ago. But their wages certainly have increased very substantially. Labor also works in the foreign policy field through its own organization, such as the ICFTU, which was founded in 1949, was founded when it became apparent that the World Federation of Free Trade Unions was not, in fact, a free trade union movement, that it was communist-dominated, and that there was little hope of breaking up the communist forces that controlled that organization. Today, the ICFTU has grown to where there are 97 organizations affiliated with it, and they're representing 54 million people in 73 countries throughout the world. It affords an opportunity of these organizations from these various countries to get together. They have helped to organize workers in countries such as India, Paraguay, and Central America. It has improved the working conditions of workers in Panama and Costa Rica. Conducts organizational schools, educational schools, and others for union leaders throughout the world. And of course, they have affiliated organizations with it which deal in the more minute problem and probably just as essential problem. Many of the international unions which are affiliated with the CIO and the AFL and independent unions in the United States are also affiliated with the International Trade Secretariat. There are 20 trade secretariats with many of the approximately 26 million membership. It affords an opportunity to deal directly with the problems of unions which are operating in a particular trade throughout the world. And through this, they have been able to extend organization on a much broader basis. In the CIO, there's the steel workers and the shipbuilders, and the mine workers, and the packing house workers, newspaper guilds and organizations such as those that are affiliated with the ILO. We'll also have the United Nations Educational Secretariat and Culture Organization, whose purpose is to contribute to peace by promoting collaboration through education, science, and culture. You might well ask, what is the ultimate goal of labor organizations by participating in the foreign policy field? Well, I've given you what I think to be a broad outline of our objectives. But I think it's well to know the exact problems faced by these workers in these various countries. I'd like to give you just a few examples. For instance, in the United States, the average worker, I'm not referring to the higher paid worker, but just an average worker, must work 30 minutes to buy a pound of butter, whereas in France and Italy, he would have to work nearly 3 hours to buy that same item. The average worker in the United States would have to work 25 minutes to buy a pound of ham. In France, he would have to work 1 hour, and in Italy, he would have to work 4 hours. Well, we could go on item after item and show that in the clothing, transportation, housing, and all the necessities that a worker and his family needs come up with the same story. I had an opportunity of having in my home one of the representatives of the Netherlands trade union movement a couple of years ago. He had spent a couple of weeks studying the incentive problem, the productive problem, and the plant that I had worked in the rubber industry, the General Tarrant Rubber Company. We have our own time-study men, and he was interested in, again, in the problem that we were faced with and how we were dealing with it. As I say, I had the opportunity of having him in my home for a while, and I had an opportunity of discussing and comparing with him the conditions of the worker in the Netherlands as compared to the worker here in the United States. And of course, the workers in the Netherlands are not faced with nearly as serious a problem as they are in other countries of Europe or of Asia. But he marveled at the fact, and it was hard for him to believe that the workers in this country enjoyed the things that they did enjoy, such as cars and radios and televisions and the like of that. That while we feel that we have a very serious housing problem, that in many respects their problems were much worse than ours. When he was ready to leave, he told me that in many respects he was sorry that he came over to this country, and I asked him why. He said, well, it's going to be awfully hard to go back and tell the workers that I represent that the American worker is so much better off. In the first place, to many of them, it's going to be hard for them to believe. And he says, I feel that our road is so long that it'll be a long, long time to where we will be able to get to where you are today. And I said, well, I hope that sometime in the future that you and your wife, your family, will have an opportunity of coming over and visiting, just on a visit with us. And to him that seemed impossible. That seemed impossible that he was ever going to have enough money just to come over for a visit. Well, frankly, I think that, again, is another example of how we look at these things as compared to the European worker. Yes, a European worker that, as I said, much better off than they are in many countries. In the United States, we enjoy a higher standard of living because, as I said before, we have higher production, higher wages, and lower prices. In other free countries of the world, productivity is low and wages are low, but in most instances, prices are higher. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood on this question of higher productivity. I think that while I think that it has contributed to the standard of living which we
professions of faith. But do we believe according to our profession? This is the great test, ladies and gentlemen. And if we fail to meet that test, we don't deserve to survive and probably won't. Because the great struggle in the world today is a struggle of forces. On the one hand, we have 1/3 of the
So outside of every factory gate, there are long lines of unemployed to keep the people frightened and to keep them serving. I might say to you that many of these same things are happening in this country today. In states such as the state of Massachusetts, in the textile industry, for instance, where the plants have been shut down. The plants have come down into the southern states and other states because they were seeking cheaper wages. Some instances they've gotten cheaper wages, and they've gotten protection that they couldn't get in the state of Massachusetts, for instance. The new industries which have come into those communities have established a very low wage. They have workers working for 75 cents per hour. And at the gates of the unorganized plants which remain in those communities, we find long lines of unemployed people. And in some instances, many instances, and too many instances, in fact, there's fear in the hearts of the workers in those plants because they see the long lines of unemployed people and they too readily accept a lesser condition than what to which they're entitled. Walking through a factory in India is like going back to the Industrial Revolution of 100 years ago. The frightened look on the faces of the people, the way they look at the boss, the look of stark fear in their faces. They are working practically for nothing, trying to eke out a bare existence. A good half of the land is owned by the great landlords, who take 50 to 60% of the crop, while the peasants pay the cost of production and does all the labor under the hot, boiling sun. The average child at birth can look forward in India to an average of 27 years of life. That is their life expectancy. But half of them die before they're 12 years of age. 25% die before their first birthday. Only 10% can read and write. These are the statistics of India, but they are also the statistics of much of the Middle East, much of the Far East, and much of Africa. Poverty is a common experience. While our positions in the different countries are not the same, nevertheless, our purposes and our aims must remain the same. It is our unions in all these countries so that more and more people can buy more and more of the good things of life for themselves and their families. And in so doing, know that the entire economy of each of their countries will be raised, and this way these countries and the entire free world can be strengthened and will serve as bulwarks against the advancement of communism or any other foreign ideologies whose purpose is to slave the working people of any country. It is noteworthy that in those countries of the free world where there's a strong democratic trade union movement, that there is neither a threat from the communists nor mass exploitation of the working people. As an example, Norway, Sweden, Great Britain, Denmark, and others are very strong economically, and there we find that the Reds are in a very weak position. In some of these countries which I've named, they don't attempt to use the fear campaign which we find existent in our country today. They take a much more enlightened approach to the problem of communism. They listen, they think, and they make their decisions. More and more, of course, we're finding that they're attempting to use fears here in order to get the people in this country to think more along the lines of the McCarthys and the Jenners and the like. We find that where the unions are weak, that even though where these countries have a democracy, that the communists are very strong, and that the workers are generally suppressed and forced to exist on substandard wages and live under substandard conditions. Now I have in mind countries such as Italy, and France, and Indonesia, and other non-communist parts of Asia. Because there are more and more of the exploitation of the working people. And as a result of that exploitation, the people in these countries, while they do enjoy a different type of government, are nevertheless not able to have their voices heard, and they're not able to exert the influences that we're able to exert here in this country. The CIO and the rubber workers believe that other nations must be allowed to work for their own improvement in accordance with their own ideals, but that improvement cannot be achieved while workers' organizations and other free institutions are suppressed. We are vitally concerned over the direction of our foreign policy, and we are working diligently to strengthen ourselves all along the line. But if we're to win the fight for freedom and democracy, we must assist the workers throughout the world to build their unions and build them strong. And by building strong unions throughout the world, we'll build strong allies, just as you have done here in Mississippi, where we've done in other states. We've built strong unions in the various communities, and as a result of building these strong unions and their associations with each other, we've been able to broaden our sphere of influence, and we've gained many of the objectives. I stated that, to start with, that the aims and the purposes of labor throughout the world, as has been enunciated by the ICFTU, was that we were to strive for bread and freedom and peace. These are the things that, again, that the workers of all countries of the world are seeking. And the free labor movement must dedicate ourselves to these broad aims and objectives. You know, if we just do the things that we're required to do, if we just perform the obligations of our job, the world would stand still tomorrow. And of course, then it would start going back. I think that we realize that the little things that we do, that beyond the call of duty, that means so much to our labor movement. And of course, that means that it reflects itself throughout our economy. I think that we have to dedicate ourselves to again to these broad objectives and to do just a little bit more in what we're obligated to do in line with the duties or the jobs which we have to perform. I'm sure that you here in Mississippi have been making that sort of contribution. And I'm sure that you're going to continue to do that. And in closing, I would like to ask you again to take stock and find out just what little bit more that you can put into this movement that will make this life a better life, and that you put a little bit more into the political action in your community and into your state, so that you will not have enacted the unfavorable type of legislation which we find in many other states. And I'm sure that if you take that sort of an interest in your local politics and your local legislative programs, that will be felt throughout this country of ours, yes, throughout this world. I want to thank you for the opportunity of being here and for the time which you've allowed me, and wish you every success in the world. Thanks very much.
On your behalf at this time, I'd like to call your attention and thank the National PAC for furnishing the very attractive and large-sized posters which you see on either side of the auditorium.
Ladies and gentlemen, or I think it would be best to say fellow workers, Lonnie, I appreciate that introduction that you gave me, and I'm glad that he didn't call me a politician, because I don't like that word any too well. Politician and the word union are both all right, but there have been quite a few degrading remarks made about them. The reason I didn't want to be called a politician, because when you hear that word, you think of someone that's trying to perpetuate themselves in office, or anyway, it's something degrading, building up bureaus, or we might say bureaucrat. And speaking of a bureaucrat, reminds me of a little instance that happened down in Smith County where I came from. A little girl down there of a very poor family, but a Christian family. a mother had taught her to believe in prayer and told her whatever she prayed for, in earnest, of course, that God would grant it. Being from a poor family, she had always wanted $100. So night after night and week after week, she prayed that for God to send her $100. But the $100 never did come. So being a child and having childish ways, she just thought that God didn't hear her prayer. So she wrote to God and asked him to send her the $100. The postmaster didn't know what to do with the letter, so he decided the best thing to do would be to send it to the little child's congressman in Washington. He received the letter, and being a Christian and very sympathetic himself, he certainly didn't want to disappoint the little girl. So he'd like to have put $100 in the envelope and mailed it back to her. But the best he could rake up was $10. So he put $10 in the envelope and sent it to the little girl. She opened it and ran gleefully to her mother and told her that God had answered her prayer. But she said he made a mistake and routed it through Washington, and those bureaucrats deducted 90% of it. So that is why I wouldn't like to be called a politician. In the past, it was my privilege to have served at the head, high and honored position, I'll say, over a statewide organization of about 20,000 members. The man himself wasn't honored, but it was a position. And then naturally it necessitated that I go all over the state of Mississippi and endeavoring to speak to groups like this, anywhere from 10 to thousands of people, being placed on the platform with dignitaries, heads of municipalities, sometimes incidentally be a city commissioners, heads of state, nation, and big army men, generals, and so forth. And if I felt any unusual honor, I don't know it. Probably I should. But at least I never felt as honored as I feel on this particular occasion, because I am speaking to America. And I'll explain that by quoting to you something I read in Will Rogers' autobiography. Will Rogers said that he had heard so much about an American till he wanted to see one. He didn't know just exactly what they looked like. So he thought the best place to find one would be at some of these big civic organizations, what he called a flag-waving group, singing patriotic songs and so forth and so on. So he visited all of these flag-waving groups to see if he could find an American. And he said about the only thing that happened to him was to be disgusted at some big bay-winded fellow trying to make an after-dinner speech. So disgusted, he started back to his home. And on his way back, he looked out across the field, and there he saw a man with his sleeves rolled up plowing. And he realized that he saw an American. Further down the road, he met another man in working clothes driving a truck. And then he realized that he had found the class of people that make America America. And that is the group that I am speaking here to today, are the group of people that make America America, a worthwhile place to live. This class of people, the working class of people, have certainly done a lot for this country. They have helped to preserve the principles and ideals of democracy. In fact, you have made it possible that we assemble here in a meeting of this kind, unmolested, by any dictator's Gestapo or any government agency. In union, there is strength. That's why your businessmen have organized a Chamber of Commerce. That's why your doctors have your medical association or their medical association. That's why your lawyers have your bar association to better themselves. There's nothing worthwhile done without a united effort. If those people can organize and glorify themselves in the eyes of the people, setting themselves up on a pedestal, and I'm not making this statement, I wouldn't want the press to quote me, but they are the class of people that Will Rogers referred to as the flag-waving class of people. If they can do that, then it is reasonable to assume that the real American, the backbone of this country, the working class of people, should organize just as well as they should, and that no one should get around and make degrading remarks about a labor organization. Now, after we organize, or when we organize, who puts up the biggest holler? Degrading and saying ugly remarks about organized labor. And it's not, I'm quoting now. I'm quoting what Will Rogers said. Generally speaking, of course, it is those flag-waving Americans. I want to tell this group that I'll say, other than the church, that the labor movement has done more for this country than any other group of people. I'm not telling you what I have read or what I think. I'm telling you what I know, what I've seen. I'm older than any of you here. And I recall back right in our home state, right over in Laurel, Mississippi, 45 years ago. I worked in a little store near the old Laurel cotton mill. I don't know whether it's still there or not. And I got 50 cents a day. I thought I was doing pretty well. But those people went to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and worked till 6 in the afternoon in this old two-story, dilapidated, unventilated building. And then late in the afternoon at 6, when the whistle would blow, I'd stand out there and watch those people come out. And that impressed me so until that picture is still in my mind. I can see it vividly right now. Those people that have been in there inhaling that dust and lint from that cotton mill, when they walked out, men, women, boys, small boys, and girls, they were the most depressed looking people that anyone could look at. They were pale. They weren't any too well dressed. And then when they went to their place of abode back down in West End, they went to that little 2-3-room house with no sanitation, no modern equipment whatever. And then when we boys would want to go down in that section at night, those kids would take brickbats and run us out of there. They'd beat you to death if you didn't leave there. Now, it's not that they were any worse than we were. Of course, I was a working man myself. And it's not the fault of the fathers or the mothers. It's not the fault of the children, because those people were doing the best they could with the wages they made. It was the environment that caused that. Now, 45 years is a long time, and labor has moved slow. The accomplishments hadn't been what we'd like it to be. But let's look at it now and see what labor has done. Today, I live and you live, and I'm nothing but a working man. I just went in the city commissioner's office 6 months ago. We live in a respectable neighborhood. We have modern equipment in our homes, and our children are not reared in the same environment that those kids were that I'm speaking about over in law. And when you go into our neighborhood, they don't throw rocks at you. And when they come to school, you can't pick my boy or your boy or girl out from Mr. Rich Man's son or daughter. And few of us send them to college. We save enough money, it's hard to do. But that is what organized labor has done for this country. Now you take in our city administration. If we as officials, I'll say it, the mayor and the two commissioners and all others, would not be drawing the salary that we are drawing today were it not for the efforts of organized labor. So I can't see why that anyone should denounce an organized effort not only to better yourself, but to better your community, city, state, and nation. Now, it helps business people. 3 weeks ago, I went up to Memphis to a Brotherhood of Railway Clerks meeting and had a joint installation of all the organizations up there. And George Harrison was there. And he said it was a foolish thing for him, for a businessman, to not be in favor of better working conditions and better wages. Because it is the laboring man that keeps the businesses up. We spend the money. It takes just about as much for me to eat as it does a millionaire. So I spend what money I get, and most of the laboring class of people do. Now I'm going to ask this question and try to answer it myself. Should a labor organization get into politics? I mean, try to elect someone. And I'm not politicking because the election's 4 years off. Now, I'm safe for 4 years. But I say they should. They must, if they want to exist and do well. It's a necessity. Everything you do these days, it's certainly hinged on legislation. We know that very well, don't we, like? It's hinged on legislation. I wouldn't offer to tell anyone how to vote, but I'll tell you how I always vote. If two men is running for a political office, and one of them is fair to the working class of people, the labor, if you please, I cast my vote for it. Now, I feel that we need a balanced government. That's just exactly why I ran here in the city of Jackson. And what I mean by a balanced government is maybe a little bit difficult for me to explain. But I feel this way. I wouldn't want to see labor get in full power. I think it would be bad for the country. We've never had that opportunity, but we might take a little more than we should. And if capital would get in power, we know it would be worse. We have 3 major veteran organizations. And it certainly wouldn't be good for them to get too much power in this country. So you have to have one organization or one group of people to offset the other and to keep it in balance. Now, if that is true economically in this country, it's certainly true in government. We should have a balanced government. And that's why I ran for the city commissioner here in Jackson, because I felt that the people, not any class, that the masses should have representation on a comparable basis. It might be we talk about organized labor, or the public does, and it's a problem to be elected to a political office, and especially in the state of Mississippi. The information I get from the Brotherhood of Railway Clerks, the officials, are that I set a precedent here in few of the southern states. Carry a union card and be elected to I'd say one of the highest office, according to the information I get, of any card-carrying man in several of the southern states here. And I'll tell you what they'll do, and they did it to me. They will ridicule you every way in the world during the campaign. Now, they threw everything at me by being a member of labor, except this building, and they would have done that if they could have picked it up. They accused me of everything. They said I didn't have enough intelligence to go along with the men who are in there now, both of them being lawyers and graduates from college. Well, I've been in there 6 months now, and I'm not talking about myself. I'm just trying to uphold labor. Don't get me that I'm full of egotism. I'm just trying to show you there's 100 people right here that have more sense than I have and could serve up there just as well or better. But now let's see what has happened for these 6 or 7 months that I've been in there. I am confident that your mayor or your commissioner and your attorney or any department head or connected with the city of Jackson, I'm confident they'd tell you that they respect my decision. The old laboring man that came from the ranks of labor. Now, I'm not saying that egotistically, but I'm trying to show you that we have some intelligence and some ability in labor, even though the man is just out working for a living. Maybe he hadn't had the opportunity that he should have had. So they can't say that. It might be interesting to know something about the operation of the government over there. Or at least we know that we have a city hall that most of us do. We have one man they call mayor, and we have two men they call commissioner. But a lot of us never thought about the whys and wherefores, just why it happens that way, just why you have those 3 men over there, how come it, or anything about it. But this commission form of government under which we operate the city of Jackson came into existence in behalf of the common class of people. And when I say common, I mean with greatest respect. The working class of people. Because the politicians had overburdened them with taxation. It originated over in Germany almost a century ago. But as far as this country is concerned, it is comparatively a new form of government. And it took an act of God to bring it into existence. In one of our southern cities where we had the old aldermanic system, representatives from every ward from all over the town, and you couldn't place the responsibility on anyone. They'd gotten in office, and it's impossible for those tax-burdened people to vote them out. You know, when you get in sometime, you just stay there. And there's nothing in the world that they could do about it. So I like to think that God took a hand in that thing. And when that tidal wave swept Galveston, Texas, swept over Galveston, Texas, and destroyed the city, just in devastation, and everything was in turmoil, they had to do something. And the people there, the tax-burdened people, called upon the governor of Texas. And he commissioned 2 men, or appointed them, and the people recommended one, and he was commissioned, thereby forming a 3-man commission. Thus, your first commissioned form of government in this country. And it proved successful, and it spread. And then in 1912, or about that time, the legislature passed an enactment here, and then your city of Jackson came under the commission form of government. Now, in conclusion, I'll say to you that as long as I am 1/3 of this government, and I hope to be a long time, that I'll adhere to the principles and ideals that caused this government to have its birth. Representing, I'll say it this way in the words of Abraham Lincoln, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Representing all of them, regardless of their social or financial standing, on a comfortable and fair basis. Not representing the working class or the laboring class more than the rich man, but to see that he gets a fair representation in our municipal government. Again, I'll say that I have enjoyed talking to you, and may God take a liking to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Luckey. Remarks except to say that we are most happy that Bob is able to be here with us again. We're always glad that he can come and be with us, and particularly so at this time to install the officers of the Mississippi State Electric Union Council. Brother Starr.
Mr. Chairman, President Hartung, Representative Leonard, Secretary Treasurer Werkow, delegates to this convention, guests and friends. The remarks that I'm going to make are going to be brief. However, I do want to make 1 or 2 points with you before this fine convention adjourns. You delegates have just elected your officers and your executive board to serve this council, to serve you as delegates, and to serve the CIO members in this state for the coming year. I do not know whether you realize it or not, but at this time you have given them an unusually difficult chore to perform. The economic situation that we face in this state and in this country at this time is quite a bit more trying and perplexing and offers more problems for the future than has offered a set of officers in a number of years. The political climate in which we find ourselves, not only nationally but particularly statewide, again is more perplexing than it has been in a number of years. We have a Republican administration in Washington, as all of you know. And I'm sure that President Hartung told you of the plans of that administration to give away the natural resources and the natural wealth of this country. This Republican administration, as you well have been told by previous speakers, does not look with favor on labor organization. It apparently does not look with favor on the social gains which have been made over the past 20 or 22 years. Legislation has been considered, talked about, and in some cases introduced to change the Social Security setup of the workers of this country, and particularly to change the laws under which we are forced to operate as members of organized labor. none of those things are designed to make our task any easier. And I might add, none of these things will make the task of these officers you have elected any easier. The legislature in the state of Mississippi is now in session. And after much talk, we are informed that the infamous so-called right-to-work bill, which is not properly named, but should be called either a right-to-scab or a right-to-work-for-nothing bill, will be introduced on next Tuesday. It's funny to me, it's amusing to me, if it wasn't so tragic, to find these fine people who call themselves saviors of democracy trying to shackle labor, when labor is the greatest force in this nation for democracy. They pick out one group of people in the country and enact something they call right to work. I wish the sponsors of this bill could go to the city of Detroit or Cleveland or Flint and talk to some of the men there who are out of jobs and show them where this legislation gives them a right to work. Those men would be glad to find that right because they're looking for work today. Or these so-called saviors of democracy, why don't they enact this legislation with regard to the doctors in the state? They have the American Medical Association, and believe me, it's not a union shop or a maintenance of membership. It's a closed shop, and you belong to it if you practice medicine. Or the Bar Association, where a lawyer also enjoys a closed shop, and he belongs to the Bar Association if he appears in a court in this state. But I don't have to tell you that this whole thing is designed to eliminate labor, and that's what the barons of big business want. We are in a fight for survival. You and your union today is in a fight for survival in the state of Mississippi. That's why I say that the job you've given these officers, which you've just elected, is a tougher job and a more perplexing job than it has been in the past. I think that you have elected some good officers. I have had the privilege and the pleasure of working with many of them over the years. But I want to say this to you. Those officers can do for you only what you allow them to do for you. They can do for your local union only what you and your local union allow you to do for them. Because if you don't support them, you might as well not elect them. They are just as strong as you make them, and no stronger. Now, they're going to be calling on you. They are going to be forced to call on you for support, for help, and for other things in the immediate future in this fight before the legislature. Now, when they do call on you, please give them the support that they ask for, because they're not going to be asking just to be funny. It's a serious thing. I want to repeat that we are in a serious situation, statewide and nationwide. And the only arm we have in the state of Mississippi to combat the things that are in front of us on the political front
is this council. You are the delegates to it. Serve it well, preserve it, and support these officers. And with those few remarks, I would like for all of the officers and the board members to rise. Will you all please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I pledge upon my honor to perform the duties of my office to the best of my ability. I will abide by the Constitution of the CIO and the bylaws of this council. Upon the expiration of my term of office, I will deliver to my successor all books, records, and other property of the council. I make this pledge of my free will with full knowledge that to violate this pledge will stamp me as a person devoid of principle and destitute of honor. I want to wish each and every one of you every success in the world, and say to you that the CIO Regional Office and the CIO Regional Office staff is at your disposal at any time that we might help you. God bless each one of you.